Let's Talk Utah show. And this is also the Liberty Mom show. I am your host, Dalane England. I have two amazing guests today. I'm so excited about them, and I know that you are going to absolutely benefit. This is going to be a life-changing show for you. I have my first guest is Mel Mattison. And not only is he an author, he might deny it, but I know it's true. He is a genius. He's fascinating because he's a well-rounded genius, which doesn't happen very often. But we're going to focus on his genius in finances. He's been working in the financing industry for over 20 years, regardless of how young he looks. He's not that young. Not only does he have a passion and interest for so many things in life, and he really cares about people, but we're going to focus on his amazing skills and knowledge and wisdom in the financing industry today. He's an entrepreneur. As I said, he is an author. His book is called Quoz. It's Quoz, Quoz. And he graduated from college. And then after that, he went traveling the world, and he decided he wanted to go back to Duke University. So he takes the GMAT, and he scored in the top 1% of the entire nation. So I'm saying, by all accounts, that is a genius. As I said, he has spent 20 years in the financial industry. He's been the CEO of 3 different SEC brokerage dealers. He knows how money works. He knows its coming and goings, and he knows what he calls, which I love. We all know about the deep state. We know, maybe we don't all know, but most of us that are awake and that have engaged, we get that there is a deep state. And he talks about the deep the deep economic state. And that's what we're really going to get into and talk about today, is the deep economic state. And Mel, welcome.
Wow. That was one of the most flattering introductions I've ever heard. I am not as smart and intelligent as people might think. However, I will admit that your introduction is true. And so
it's accurate.
I do want to say this because I think that, not it's not to toot my own horn, but just for the listeners as they listen to us, so they know, okay, yes, when I studied, and there's an entrance exam for the business school, which is the GMAT, and I got 790. The average at Harvard Business School is 740. So I was much higher than all of these. And these are things that I have done. And as you have mentioned, Dalane, and we were talking offline, you looked at me like, oh, this is a young guy. I do look relatively young, and I'm only 49 years old. I'll be 50 next year, and I was born in 1975. And I'm already, independently wealthy. I own millions of dollars in real estate, different things. So I've done well in my life. I went to Duke. I got an MBA. I understand the way money works, and I don't understand it from an economic point of view, where people get PhDs and they, go teach economics. I understand economics from the way the world really works. Yes. And I'm very concerned about it. And in the last few years, I left my last position, which was as the CEO of a broker dealer for a venture capital funded startup firm. And I decided to write a book called Quoz. I'm not really here to push that. I'm really just here to talk to you and to talk to your audience about what is really going on from a monetary perspective, which I think is not only important for your financial life, but I think that there are certain points in time where monetary activities by the government actually become important for, your personal freedoms. And I think we're getting to a point where finances and money and all that stuff is starting to coalesce around issues around personal freedom and liberty. And I am a constitutionalist. I believe in the Constitution. And I just think that there's a lot of stuff going on that is very important, and very happy to be here to talk to you about this today.
And you so nailed it, Mel. These things are so important. And that's why when I started the show, this show is going to be important to literally every single person. And I don't even just mean in Utah or America. This show is important to every person around the globe because you're going to give us some great insights on what is happening. And so I kind of want to just start by laying the groundwork of kind of where we are. And we can't go back to the beginning, but I think it would be worth starting with President Nixon, who removed the gold standard. I think that's a decent place to start. Where money, when we had the gold standard, money was like literally a receipt of value created. It's a receipt of goods and services. So it represented something of value, something that had intrinsic value. Removing the gold standard completely changed that. I say it changed the world because I don't think it just changed America. I think it changed the world. So I'd kind of like to, I don't want people to think that we're wearing our tinfoil hats. This is not like off the edge crazy talk. This is very much, what is real and what really happened. We can document it. It's all out there. And that created, a total change in the way money is held and handled.
Yes.
You want to address that?
Exactly. No, what you're bringing up is very profound. And if people really dig down deep into themselves, they understand that money is very important, right?
Yes.
So my family actually has, operated, multiple broker dealers over basically the last 100 years. I've been very involved in finance. And one of the things my uncle, who was an individual who was a Korean War veteran, eventually earned, literally about $100 million. He's a very wealthy man. He told me, Mel, there's not much more that people get more emotional about than money.
It's true.
And
Money in our lives.
It's very important. And I think what I've come to believe over the years is that money, and it's very hard for us to even imagine this, but that money is a control mechanism. And it's very hard for people to imagine a world without money.
Yes, it is.
It is. It's very hard. And if you go back, you can actually imagine a world without it. But let me just take one step back and say this, that when you talk about where are we heading and what are we doing, I think what's happening is that there is a very important, a very powerful group that has been in control of money for centuries, and they're continuing to be in control of it. I call it the fourth branch of government. So, if you look at the judicial, the legislative, the executive, I believe, and I can prove this in my opinion, and I can go back to 1694. I can go back to William III, who was the King of England, who created the initial modern central bank, which is the Bank of England. That this was essentially an operation to move the elites into the control of government. And what many Americans do not understand is that this battle between central banks and the people is a longstanding battle. Jefferson was completely against it. This was a Hamiltonian idea. There have been three central banks in the history of the United States. Right now, obviously, we are under the Federal Reserve System, but this is not the first central bank. This is the third central bank. There have been many periods where we did not have a central bank, and this came into being in 1913 under Woodrow Wilson, who was essentially promised the presidential nomination if he supported central banks. He was the governor of New Jersey. He was basically a nobody. And when the people went down to Jekyll Island, as I'm sure many of your listeners know from the famous book by G. Edward Griffin, The Creature of Jekyll Island, that in 1911, people went down to Jekyll Island, and this is J.P. Morgan and all these people. They realized we need a central bank. And they said, well, we can't get that in with the current president. And so they essentially prophesied to the governor of New Jersey at the time, who was Woodrow Wilson, if you do this. And here's the other thing. What else happened in 1913 was the passage of the amendment allowing income tax. And so
16 and
we
17, Amendment 16 and 17,
yes,
totally changing our
exactly.
Constitution, totally changing the way our Constitution works.
Yeah, and totally.
Don't tell me that we can't pass a bad by having 2/3 of the Congress and 3/4 of the states, because I think Amendment 16 and 17 prove that terrible, terrible amendments can be passed with even with the way that Article 5 is. So yes, continue on.
No, you're exactly right. These are huge things.
Yes.
We in 1913 we did income tax and we did Federal Reserve. We created a central bank. And the next year, Europe entered into World War One. And these are not like disconnected ideas. Like a lot of people would say, "Oh, well, it's just crazy kind of coincidence that
Incidences.
that the United States created a central bank and allowed income tax, and then a world war happened." No.
And people always say, I can't figure out what was the real cause of World War One. Because you go back and you read the history teacher, it's really hard to kind of wrap your brain around, like, what? That's what caused World War One? It makes no sense. So what you're saying, tying that in, that makes so much sense.
Yes, this was a power grab.
Yes.
This was an attempt to recognize, and I actually go back. I go back in the way that I think about things is I go back to the 1600s, and I go back to post-enlightenment thought, and I go back to um, what was the ultimate control mechanism in medieval Europe. It was land. And then what I do is I think about it that what happened was there was a shift from land as wealth to money as wealth.
Yes.
And this happened around 1694. And that was when the creation of the Bank of England came in. Now, if people want to understand, why does Ron Paul say end the Fed? Why? A lot of people don't really understand what the central bank is. The
Right.
central bank is the fourth column. It is the elite's interjection into political decision making. And so what happens is, if you go back and you look at 1694 and you say, okay, here's when the Bank of England was formed under William III. Why did William III form it? Well, you have to look at what was the purpose of the central bank. And what it was William III was actually the first sovereign of England to ever default on debt. So he couldn't pay back his debt. Okay. So he borrowed money, he couldn't pay it back. All of a sudden, wealthy people in England said, we cannot lend money to the king anymore because he might not pay it back.
Right.
And then what happened is he needed money because he wanted to continue another war against France. And so he says, okay, well, how can I get money? And so what happens is he says, okay, the wealthy people won't lend me money, but what I can do is I can create this bank that has, and this is the key, the only ability to print paper money. And that's 1694. It's a creation of paper money. And he says, you will print paper money. The rich people say, okay, we'll operate the bank. We'll take money in. And what we'll do is we'll funnel the real gold and silver so that you can pay your militaries to go fight wars. And that's the purpose of the central bank. It's to take money from the people, siphon it off, and give it to the government to do what they want to do. And so when people say, well, why do you want to end the Federal Reserve, Mel? Well, the reason I want to end the Federal Reserve, and this is the same thing that Jefferson said. He said in a letter in 1812, banking establishments are more dangerous than standing armies. What it is this is a siphoning off of our wealth. And we've seen it in the last few years where inflation has gotten to 20% because of bank printing, and it's just going to continue. And so what's happening is that we are being taxed in a way that could never get put through Congress, but we're
Right.
essentially being taxed through inflation, through the central banks. They're being an arm of this, essentially, I would call it elitist government. And so that's what's happening. I mean, that's what I see happening anyways.
Yeah, and taxing is a way to control people, and that's really what this was designed to do, is really institute control. And that's why the founders, I think, I mean, all the ones that I have studied, they were very, uh, they have very strongly advised against paper money. Article 1,
Mm.
Section 8, it says that the Congress has the power to coin money, which doesn't mean paper
Coin,
money,
very
it's to
important.
coin it.
Yes.
Very important. It doesn't actually give them the authority to print paper money. And the founders were vehemently against that because of what we're talking about, how you could create a false financial system through that. And all these kinds of things can happen. So, and I just wanted to point out, because I know you know, and I just want to make sure all of our listeners know, because there is a belief system, the Federal Reserve is it's a branch of the federal government. And so I just want to make sure everyone understands the Federal Reserve is a private company. It's a private entity. It's kind of a public-private partnership, the way I see it. Like they're in cahoots with the government, but they're not, they're completely in control of themselves. They kind of tell the government sometimes what to do.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you look at the history of the Federal Reserve, and number one, okay, let's be clear. 1913, what is it called? It's the Federal Reserve System Act.
Right.
And that last word system is important because it's not about the FOMC and Jerome Powell. It's about underneath that, which is the system, which is the 12 regional banks. The New York Fed, the Cleveland Fed, the Richmond Fed, the San Francisco Fed. So there's 12 regional banks. Guess who gets to appoint the board of directors of those banks? It's the member banks, and by member banks, they're talking about J.P. Morgan, Citibank. So it's all controlled by the central banks. No. Central banks is completely a artifice controlled by banking cartels, going back to the Rothschilds. And if you look at like different things like the Bank for International Settlements, which is a bank headquartered in Basel, Switzerland, which is the central bank for central banks. Most people have never even heard of the Bank for International
Right.
Settlements.
Mhm.
This is all controlled. This is what I call the fourth branch of government. Like
Mhm.
there's the legislative, the judicial, the executive, and then there's the elites. And the elites branch is central banking, and this is how they control it. And that's why people like Ron Paul, they're like, oh, well, these people, or Jared Griffin, or other people, what is wrong with the Fed? And most people say, oh, there's nothing wrong with the Fed. It's just this, it's not an important organization. No, this is the fourth branch of government, and they're controlling interest rates. They're controlling lending rates, they're controlling the economy, and they're continuing to do so and will continue to do so. And so if people want to understand like how is the elite class maintaining their eliteness, it's through the central banks, and that is getting worse and worse every year because we're now in a position that we have not been in since the 1860s or the 1920s, where, and this is a real number. Okay, so you can look at throughout United States history, and you can say, okay, what is the percentage of wealth in the country that is going to wages? And we call that wealth as a percentage of GDP. And we are now between 1970 and about now, we've done the same thing that we did between 1820 and 1860. And so what we're doing is we're pushing ourselves to a position where many, many people in this country are simply, cut off from wealth. And what happens is the American dream is dying. And what happens if you look at 1860s and 1920s? What happened? Civil War, World War One. So we're in a very dangerous position, and I think we're in a position where it's very possible that things actually devolve into violence, which I would never want to ever happen. But I think we're actually in a position where we're getting close to that.
Well, if you go back and look at history, people don't like tyranny. They don't like to be controlled. They don't want to be ruled over. But there's one thing that people do hate more than tyranny, and that is anarchy. And so it seems really interesting that there's just this huge movement to create anarchy in our society. You see these pockets of massive
Mhm.
anarchy. And when you create anarchy, what you create is an atmosphere for people to say, you know what? I'll take tyranny. I will take a ruler. I would
Mhm.
rather have martial law than have this anarchy where no one is safe. Bring on the martial law. And so it
Mhm.
just, again, looking through history, I'm not a prophetess. I don't know what's in
Mhm.
the future, but I do read the scriptures, and it very much is in line with
Mhm.
anarchy will be created so that we will be able to willingly surrender and submit to martial law or to be ruled. And one of the ways that I see that happening, and I think, you just moved right into to this, is like we see now, some people don't think that we're being tracked, that we're being monitored in all that we do. And so I'd like to
Mhm.
talk about, do you see money being a way to track and monitor people? We have social credit scores, which is proven. And then we've got
Mhm.
what you were talking about, the CBDC, which is the central bank digital currency. So do you think that central bank digital currency is a way to track people? Is that real?
Yes. No, no, you nailed it. You nailed it right there. I mean, it is very profound. It's recognizing that these are the pretexts for control, and this is what happens. Is you just said, yeah. Well, if I personally believe, and I am not someone who would ever acknowledge or state, okay, let's become violent.
Oh,
However, there is Thomas Jefferson, I believe, did say that the tree of liberty needs to be refreshed from time to time by the blood of tyrant. Like, look, here's what I'm saying. That this is just what happens. Okay, I would put it this way. Okay, like, do you look back on history, and let's go back to ancient Egypt? Do you look at the history of rulers and think that their general disposition is to control and manipulate things for their advantage? If you believe that what happens over time is that individuals, countries, whatever it is, their general disposition is to control and to take over kind of individual acts. If you believe that, then what's happening is that we're heading more and more towards that. And then if you believe contrary to that, that there's a impetus or an impulse by the people, which would be the people of France in 1800s France under Napoleon, which would be the people in the United States in 1776, which would be, if you believe there's an impulse by the people to say, well, we do not want this to happen, um, then I think if you agree with those two things, that there's an impulse by those in control to control even more, and then there's an impulse by the people to say we don't want control. If you believe that, then what we're heading towards is a what has happened throughout history time and time again, which is a confrontation between those in control and those who do not want to be controlled.
being controlled.
And yes, exactly. And this is liberty. This is 1776. This is people and so I'm not advocating that. I'm not saying, oh, we need to revolt against our government, because especially if you start talking about um violent revolt, then all of a sudden you open yourself up to arrest and then things, which they're already doing to Donald Trump, right? So what's happening is that we are not in a country that is free anymore. We are now entering into a tyranny, and that's what's happening.
Yeah,
I
that's
don't
really
understand.
Yeah, but going back to the scriptures, we are told that if we will stand up, if we will stand, that we don't actually have to fight with guns and swords, but we have to fight with words and with civility. That we have to educate, and if we are willing to do that, that we will overcome this tyranny that is, and it won't be without pain, it won't be without sorrow, it won't be without death. It will be, it's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be smooth and easy, but it is, we have been called to do it. And that's why I'm where I am. That's why I'm in this situation where I like to call it a stand. I feel like it's time to stand. And we have been blessed with so much. We have been blessed with so much freedom that we can't even appreciate it. And we've been blessed with so much prosperity. We can't imagine losing it. And I think that's where people can't even imagine the kind of control that is being usurped over us. I want to remind everyone you're listening to KMMU. KMMU.org is where you can listen to us on Rumble, YouTube, X, Twitter, and our website. And we have amazing guests with us, Mel Mattison, and it's phenomenal. I'm learning so much. I would love you to, I'd like to just really quickly, before we let people call in, we will in a minute, I'd like to address that there have been quite a few states that have passed legislation in their state to stop CBDC, which is central banking, central bank digital currency. So states are trying to stop this. Is it possible for states to be able to stop it, or is this something we're going to have to handle on a more federal level?
Okay, I think that actually it's going to be an individual choice level, because I think they're going to
Okay.
put something in place
Mm-hmm.
that makes things very appealing to people. And this is what I think is very dangerous, is that they they know both things. They know the carrot and they know the stick.
Right.
And they're going to provide the carrot. They're going to say, if you go into our system,
Yeah.
which is going to be a more digital system,
Mm-hmm.
then we could possibly give you better interest rates. We
Right.
could. This is what, if you look at, and I do a lot of research on these things. I look at the Bank for International Settlements. I look at things that are being put forth. There was a big stable coin bill by Senators Loomis and Gillibrand, which are the senators of New York and Wyoming. So these things are coming up. I mean, I'm not going to put it in, make a big point, but I have all kinds of documents of like, okay, here's this, here's that, here's the 25-page Loomis Gillibrand bill. This is the stable coin payment bill. These people are trying to take control of our money supply.
Yes.
I have all the documents. I research it all. That's what I do. I'm a monetary nerd. I look at this stuff and I look at what they're trying to do, and it's very dangerous. And they're not happy with kind of the status quo. And the status quo would be that people, they get their direct deposits in the bank, and then, it goes into a possibly physical, bill. Like it could go into $100 bill. I think what they want is they want everything digitally controlled.
Absolutely.
And once they
They've
do
been
that,
clear about that, though. They are. It's not a
yeah,
secret. They've been
yeah,
pretty upfront about it.
yeah, they have been
Convenience,
upfront about it.
convenience, and people buy into it because like it's gonna be so amazing. It's so convenient. You can just have it, put it right in your forehead. You can have it on your phone. You don't have to carry everything around, and it's just so convenient. You can just pay for everything. It just goes right into your account, and we're so close right now already.
Mm. Yeah, that's what they want, and they want it to be controlled, and they
Mhm.
put it in their papers. They have papers that I research on the Bank for International Settlements about what they call the blueprint for the future of the monetary system. I mean, they talk about what they want to do, and they say, okay, we want to have this stuff be programmable.
Mhm.
Programmable is a way to say, okay, Delane, you've bought too many red meats
Oh
these
no,
last
yeah,
month,
too many
and
dresses. Too many
yes,
dresses.
yeah, yeah, dresses, whatever it is. And they say, "Oh, well, we're going to shut you off. Like you
Yeah.
can't have that much more red meat, and you can't have that many more dresses, and you can't have." So this is a way for social control, and this is what they are doing. And if people look at it, and they can go to the DTCC, which is the Depository Trust Clearing Corporation. This is an organization that actually owns like most of the assets in our monetary system, and they can look at and see how this gets passed through, where essentially they get to control it. And by controlling all of this, that's essentially control of us. And I believe, okay, let me take one step back. Let's just
Okay.
imagine we're in 3000 BC Egypt, right? Do you or do you not believe that the pharaohs and people in charge just want to control things as much as possible? What they're limited by is technology. As we get closer and closer to today's age, let's just imagine that the impulse of the elites is the same. And if the impulse of the elites is the same and they want to control everything, then now the technology is just so much better to control things. So I don't think the elites have changed. I think what has changed is that the technology has gotten much more cooperative for the elites. And therefore, we need to be very, very careful, because what's happened is the elites only had so much control 3,000 years ago. But now with AI, with
Mhm.
CBDCs, with the current, like, their potential for control is huge. So all I'm doing is saying, let's just imagine that the impulse of the elites has not changed. That the impulse of the elites is to control. But what has changed is the technology is getting so much stronger for control. And that's what's scary.
That is, and you make such a great point and so well stated, because when people get control and get power, power kind of begets power. Once we get power, we find it's pretty intoxicating. We
Yeah.
like power, and it's a very rare person. George Washington was considered the greatest man by many to ever live. If he was willing to be president and step down and give that power up, they're like, never heard
Yeah.
of such a thing. No one has
No.
that kind of power and then just steps away from it. It doesn't happen because man's natural proclivity is to, when they have power, is to gain more power and to usurp power over others. So that is just human nature. It's just totally natural. Let's take some calls. Our calling number is 385-899-2134. I'm going to repeat it again in a minute because you might not have had a pen or pencil handy. So go grab one and I will repeat it. But in the meantime, do you want to talk about the UN involvement? Do you see the UN involved in this, or do you think the UN is just totally arm's length?
Well,
Should
let
we
me just
worry
say,
about
I,
the
I
UN?
I I could in the meantime get into that, but I think you just
Okay.
brought up an amazing point, which is George Washington.
Okay.
I have loved George. I was raised in Virginia. I'm a
Wow.
Virginian. I live in North Carolina right now. Where George Washington, Mount Vernon is not too far
Vernon.
away. Um, it was amazing. I mean, this was a guy that people looked at him and they said, "This guy, he could run the entire country forever." And
Yes.
he didn't even want to be president.
Right.
He didn't. He like this is how amazing is that?
Yes.
To have a founder, to have
Mhm.
someone who said, "You know what? I don't want it. I don't want it."
Yeah.
Like, I think the United States is truly, and this is now going to get off into a whole nother tangent, but it's a spiritual, special place, and
I
ordained
so
by
agree
God,
with you.
or
Ordained
ordained by
and
God.
created by
Yeah,
God. Mhm.
yeah, yeah.
By
I
God-fearing
mean,
people that were very human and frail, but they were God-fearing people who loved
yeah.
God.
The United States is not like just like Russia or
Mm-mm.
Ukraine or one of the other 125 or 235 other nations. The United States is a special place. This
Mhm.
is this is Ronald Reagan's land on a hill. Like,
Mhm.
we are the special place on Earth. And I think if people just dismiss that and say, "Oh, no, 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 the United States is nothing special. The United
Just another
States is
country.
just
Mhm.
another country. Don't worry about it." I think that's very wrong. I think we're a very special place. And I think that we had very special leaders. We had very special founders. Um, and if you just dismiss that, then I think you're making a big mistake, because we really are, um, in many ways, like a beacon. And I don't think we need to be dominating things, because I'm
Right.
actually anti-domination. In fact,
Absolutely. So is
I have
America. The
yes,
design of America isn't to dominate. We don't go over and take other
no,
countries. We
no,
don't
no,
fight
no.
wars to go like England did to go take over other countries. Thus,
Yeah.
American exceptionalism. We are the exception. It's not because
Mm.
Americans are greater, but the plan of America is an exception to the rest of the world. It
Exactly.
is exceptional.
Exactly. And I go back, I'm a simpleton. Like, I believe in the original thing that the founder said, which is avoid foreign entanglements. Like, all that
Yes.
stuff just makes sense to me. And that's why I don't want to fund Ukraine, and I don't want to fund Israel, and I don't want to fund Taiwan. I looked at the what was the Ukraine bill. I looked into
Mhm.
detail of the Ukraine amendment. It's a 49-page amendment. You can read in that. You can find $100 million there to search for and
I'm on
discover
hold. I can
radioactive
with
isotopes.
Yes.
They're looking for Ukrainian or uranium. I mean, these things are not right. We should not be
Right.
defending Ukraine. We should not be, in my opinion, and you might disagree.
No, I
I
totally
I
agree.
pers- I personally believe that we are overstretching things. I think we should take care of ourselves. I think we have an amazing position, as Americans, and I think we need to defend our borders, stop spending money on foreign wars, and go back to the ethos of the founding fathers, which is, be wary of foreign entanglements and all these things. And that's what I believe.
Yeah, well, they were pretty right on that. I think it kind of shows because we're spending money we don't actually have.
Hey guys,
Okay,
I have a caller for you.
we've got a caller. I think it's Doug. So,
This is
Doug,
Doug.
okay,
Doug,
great.
go ahead and ask your question. Let's see if we can hear you.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Thank you, Doug. Thanks for being here. Go ahead with your question.
Okay, I have a handful of questions. The first question I have is, I'd like to know more about the CBDC. I understand from something that I heard some time ago from Mel that they actually are doing it. They're denying that they're actually in process of developing it. And I'd love to hear what that looks like. I have a couple more questions if I can.
Did you get that, Mel?
Well, yeah, I think the first thing is that they're doing a backdoor CBDC. I think they're already aware that people are getting the gist that a central bank digital currency is essentially authoritarian control. And I think they're trying to push it through. And this is why I have brought up the Loomis Gillibrand, and you can search this on Google, Lewis Gillibrand Payment Stablecoin Act. This was the bill that is now being introduced. And what it does, if you look at it, it essentially says that every single stable coin has to, at the end of the day, denote and put their assets into a depository institution, in other words, under the Federal Reserve. And so there's no question that they are scared to death that money gets out of their hands, because money is the ultimate control mechanism. And if it's Bitcoin, if it's stable coins, whatever it is, they're going to do whatever they need to do to bring it under their control. They're doing it through these stablecoin acts. There's a reason why Bitcoin is now in ETFs. It's because we're bringing it into the control of the system, and you cannot allow money to be run by anybody other than the government, and that they're going to make sure that happens.
Yeah, I think
Okay,
that's
could you
very
talk
true.
about what stablecoin is?
Yes. So stable coins are essentially, uh, you know, basically a tokenized asset whereby the underlying instrument of money generation is the United States T-bill. So you have to understand these are T-bill buying instrument, and by T-bill, what I mean is that we're going to buy short-term debt of the United States. The United States government needs to sell incredible amounts of debt over the coming decades. We are already selling ridiculous amounts of debt. The United States debt to GDP is something around 120%, but there's even more debt that's going to be generated. Part of that is that the Social Security Trust Fund is going bankrupt. You got so in other words, the United States knows that we have two choices. One choice is pay what we owe. The other choice is austerity. And by austerity, I mean like we're going to reduce Social Security benefits. We're going to do that. So that's not going to happen. No politician is ever going to vote for austerity. So the only other alternative is to pay out all of these things that we've agreed to pay out. And the only way to do that is by increasing the money supply, increasing dollars. And many people have become very, very suspicious of the central bank expanding the money supply. And so there is another way, and it's not the central bank expanding the money supply, it's the banking system expanding the money supply. And if you do that, then what you do is you essentially you basically mandate that banks buy debt. And so whether it's the central bank or banks or whatever, it's going to be mandated. And the way you mandate it ultimately is at the end of the day, you create what they call financial repression, which is capital controls, which is you can no longer send money outside of the United States. And once you stop people from sending money out of the United States, you make it in the United States. So all these things are going to happen. They're just taking a little bit of time. But this is what's going on with their monetary system, and it is heading towards a point of collapse.
Go ahead, Doug. I think you had a question. Go ahead.
A friend of mine was offered to buy a stable coin that had it was tied to the dollar 1 for 1. Where did that come from?
Yeah, these stable coins, I mean, I've got it in front of my face right now, the Louis Gillibrand Payment Stablecoin Act. You can look at this. This was put into Congress in April 17th. This is, and if you look at it, what they say is that right now, these stable coins, what they do is they take money, they buy T-bills, and it's outside of the banking system. And if you look at the Loomis Gillibrand payments, they want it to be in the banking system because once it gets into the banking system, they can practice what they call fractional reserve banking. They can do what they have done since 1694 for the last 330 years, which is the central banks essentially create money, inflate the money supply. But there's just a corrupt group that runs the world. If people don't believe that, then I frankly believe they're relatively naive.
Is the stable coin issued by an arm of the government or an arm of the Federal Reserve, or is it completely private?
No, this will be under the Federal Reserve. I'm going to quote from the Loomis Gillibrand Payment Stablecoin Act highlights. The legislation grants the Federal Reserve or state/OCC, that's the Office of the Control of the Currency, the ability to take independent enforcement action against a depository issuer, but the Federal Reserve and state must act jointly for trust companies below 10 billion. And then if you go to the next bullet point, it says that if it's above 10 billion, then the Federal Reserve can act independently. So this is being written into law. This is not a joke. This is not like conspiracy theory. The federal government understands the importance of the money supply. They understand that you cannot allow Bitcoin and stable coins and all this. It needs to go through the monetary and commercial system, because if it goes through the commercial banking system, then all of a sudden the commercial bank can multiply money through what they call the fractional reserve banking system. If you allow money to just go around outside of the commercial banking system, then you have chaos, and they will not allow that. And they will get violent if necessary to stop this from happening.
Okay, would you talk about David Webb and Taken?
Yeah, this is very important, because I believe that the people in charge understand that this entire financial system is on a verge of collapse. And what they have done, and this is not this is not conspiracy theory. This is not something that you cannot look up. If you look and you look at the UCC, the Uniform Commercial Code, and this was done very slippery. This was done through a state-by-state basis. You can look and you can see that in the 1990s, after somebody who was, and this is, no doubt about it, this was a CIA operative who formed the Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation. They put into place something called securities entitlements. And what that means is that when you have, let's say you own 100 shares of Apple in your JP Morgan account, you might think that you actually own that Apple. But what is the ultimate authority of who owns that Apple is who owns that Apple security at the Apple books, the books and records of Apple Computer. And what happens is Apple Computer decided we're just going to list all of our owners as the DTCC. And the DTCC is the Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation. This is an organization, as I mentioned, founded by a CIA operative. And this is the way that if you actually ask, if you have 200 grand at Morgan Stanley, and you say to your stockbroker, who truly owns the stock I have in Morgan Stanley, he's not gonna have any idea. He's gonna say, oh, Morgan Stanley owns it or you own it. But the truth is that if you actually look into the details of it, it's going to be owned by the Depository Trust and Clearing Organization. And the DTCC owns over $100 trillion of U.S. securities and assets. And what has happened is that they created, through the UCC, again, the Uniform Commercial Code, a provision that allows them to confiscate assets. And so we have a legal framework in place at this point in time that allows for a confiscation of assets. And this is very scary. And I'm not predicting that the world's going to collapse and everything. I predict what I call a plan A and a plan B. And the plan A is that they're going to manufacture inflation, and that inflation is going to cause home prices to go up, stock prices to go up, but it's not going to cause a collapse. And that's their game plan. And then I have a plan B, which is that they realize that maybe this deflating away of the debt is impossible. And then, we're going to have a collapse, and then, they're going to essentially claim assets. So we have a very, very dangerous situation going on right now.
It sounds to me like, based on what you just said, let me just walk it through so I'm clear. So if there were a financial collapse, let's just say that just like the banking collapse that we had that started in the securities industry with the securitization of loans, if there were a collapse of a large security brokerage company holding all of the shares for all of those shareholders. And they became insolvent. And they couldn't be rescued by SIPC because there wasn't enough money. It was maybe across the board, like the banking crisis was. That what would happen is that the shares of those stocks would revert back to this phantom company instead of to the shareholders for resolution of bankruptcy. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, exactly. Especially with every security. And I would add to this that if you go to the Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation website and you look at what they are planning to do, they do not only want to keep all of the securities, but now they want to add real assets, which is homes, cars, everything. And so that there is a play to put into force a legal framework for the confiscation of all assets,
including a house and real property that was mortgaged.
House, real property, securities, everything. This is,
wouldn't it?
What was that?
Wouldn't the property have to have a mortgage or a lien on it?
No, not at all. No, this would be a transfer from some kind of a county ownership. They call it the tokenization of all assets. You can go to DCCC website. This corporation owns, and you can look. This is not like some conspiracy theory, anything. They own over $85 trillion in assets. This is the organization where JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, all of these companies transfer their asset ownership to. Then, not only do that, they transfer it through a corporation ownership structure. And then they have created a partnership, which is called Seed and Company, Seed and Company, which is a partnership. Now, you might ask, Mel, why is a partnership important? Because according to U.S. law, partnerships can transfer assets based on the signature of one partner. So we essentially have tens of trillions of dollars of U.S. assets under a single authority. And I would also add that this company was started by a guy who was not only an Army guy in World War II, but then eventually a CIA operative. So we have a CIA operative company controlling more or less every asset in the United States.
So, Mel, is there a way that people can guard themselves against this kind of thing? Is there something that people can do who don't have a mortgage, their property's free and clear? What can we do to protect our assets?
Yes, this is very dangerous. This is why I believe that gold prices have done extremely well recently. I think that they are in a slight consolidation period, but I would not be surprised to see gold go to $3,000 an ounce by the end of the year. I think that people actually understand that this is a very serious situation. These types of situations, as I mentioned before, have happened before. In 1944 with Bretton Woods, where we redesigned the economic system. If you like, there are periodic points, and they don't happen very often. You look at 1971, where Nixon ended the convertibility of the dollar to gold. Like, there are points in time, and they're not that infrequent. I mean, 71 is only, I know, what, 40, 50 years ago. These are not very infrequent, where massive monetary policy decisions get switched around. And I think what's happening is that we're very close to a point where we're going to have some massive monetary policy decisions switched around. And so if you look at it and you say, oh, well, Mal, this is very normal, there's no problem with it, we'll just continue for the next 100 or 200 years, I would say no. I would say actually what we are is we're on the verge of a major monetary shift. And I think if you look at what are the central banks doing of China, of India? What they're doing is they're buying gold. And so these are very clear signs that there's a major monetary shift going on. And that's going to lead into the, gold going to 3,000, 4,000. And then the US dollar as a reserve currency. You could look back, okay, the United States at one point was 50% of the world GDP. We're now 20%. At one point, we were 95% of world reserve currency. We're now like 70%. Like everything keeps going down. We don't need a collapse. We don't need the US dollar to go to zero. All we need to do is have things continue. And what you will see is you will see gold go up. You will see the dollar go down. Yeah, like this is just what's going to happen. And as that happens, that's inflationary. And that is why I'm actually bullish on the stock market. So to get to a macroeconomic view, people might say, Mel, you sound like you're talking about disaster. I think a lot of people come on and they say, oh, we're heading towards disaster, sell stocks. I actually don't do that. I actually think that stocks are not only up for reasons, which is, the collapse of the dollar, but they're probably going to keep going up. And so if the S&P 500 right now today is at 5,200, I would argue that by the end of the year, I wouldn't be surprised if it's at 6,000. So what this is doing is what? It's creating wealth inequality.
Doug's got another question for you. Go ahead, Doug.
I have one more question, then I'm done. Okay, so then the only other question I have is that if there is a project, and I'm trusting that what you're saying is accurate, if there is a project in place to create the CBDC, it's a pretty complicated project. So my question is a two-part question. When would it be ready to implement, and how quickly could it be implemented?
Okay. So I mentioned April 17th. This was put forward in Congress. It is called the Loomis-Gillibrand Payment Stablecoin Act. This is essentially a backdoor CBDC. I believe that central banks realize that the population does not want CBDCs. But if you look at the Gillibrand Act, and you can go and read it, it says that essentially the legislation grants the Federal Reserve or the state OCC the ability to take independent enforcement action against a depository institution. This is forcing money under stable coins to go under the Federal Reserve System. I think the main thing that the Federal Reserve, all these things, all they're worried about is like who controls the money? Who controls money? If you can print money, then they will not allow that. And if they can put it under it, it doesn't need to be a CBDC. It could be a stable coin, but a stable coin issued by private issuers that then go under bank depository institutions. As long as they maintain that control of the issuance of money. But this is the thing, is that this is breaking down, and this is essentially what has happened, I would say, throughout history. And then what happens is eventually you get to some sort of a physical altercation, let's say. And I don't want that to happen. I'm not advocating. What I'm afraid of and what I think is happening is that we're getting close to that point, that no longer will people just say, oh, it's okay, we'll figure it out. But that eventually people are going to say, okay, there's no way to figure this out, and we need to take action.
Got it. Thank you.
So you don't know when, but we know it's coming.
I believe it's coming. I believe it's coming in the same way that people thought it was crazy in Boston in 1775. when they put forth like an extra 1% tax on the tea. These were not big changes. These are things that happen. I would add another thing. There's a guy named Peter Titchen who is actually a leftist who I don't agree with, but I think he does a lot of great insights, and he's researched things, and he's looked at changes in wages as a percentage of GDP. So if you think about how much money is getting paid out to the people as a percentage of GDP, and what he noticed is that between 1820 and 1860, there was a reduction in wages as a percentage of GDP that precisely mirrors the reduction between 1970 and 2020. And so what we're saying is that we are seeing the same, I would call it the taking from the masses. I would call it where basically what's happening is the average person is getting pushed and pushed and pushed into a worse and worse situation. And it's very similar right now in 2020 as it was in 1860. And we know what happened in 1860, right? We had a civil war. So we are getting to a point where things are just not going well. And people are not happy about it. And if I was a 31, as I mentioned early in this episode, I'm going to be 50 years old next year. If I was a 30-year-old person and I was looking at the way the world looks to me right now, it doesn't look very good. Because, like, if I was a white male, I would be like, okay, I used to compete against other white males. Now I don't compete against other white males. I compete against Indians. I compete against Asians. You have high interest rates. You have all these things. And so there used to be a position where my grandfathers, my uncles, they used to basically have it made. You know what I mean? Like when my grandfather graduated from college in 1920, like all he had to do is go work for somebody and he'd basically become an elite and a millionaire. That's not the way the world works anymore. And so we are heading in, and this was also very much discussed during World War II. So people discussed that like there would become a point where American Euro sovereignty and privilege would get questioned. And it's like, do you want to defend that or give it up? I want to defend it. I've always talked about, look, hey, I'm not somebody who wants to, give up on, basically privilege. I want privilege. I think if you're born rich and you're kind of stupid, then you're like, oh, let's be free. But I think if you actually have a mind in your head, then you realize the world cannot be like completely even. And you have to recognize, do you want to continue that privilege? So I try to continue privilege. And a lot of people say, well, that's racist or whatever. I say, well, that might be true, but I want to continue it because it benefits me and my family.
Well, and another point I think that's really important is that everybody wants something different. It's having equal outcomes doesn't make everyone equal because different people want different things, and none of us are the same, and our circumstances are not the same. And what's really great about America is the American dream allows the opportunity for us to create whatever it is that we want to create the life that we want to create for ourselves and for our families. So Mel, thank you so much. It's been absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much for your wealth of knowledge, and we really appreciate you spending this time with us. We look forward to having you on again. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we have another show coming up, another guest.
We do.
Dalane? Okay.
Yes, we do. Our next guest, stay with us. Our next guest is Colby Jenkins, who is running for Congressional District 2 in the state of Utah. And he's also a great guest, an amazing person. And we're really excited to welcome him. I don't want to spend a lot of time on his resume because we won't get anything else done. So he was born and raised in Roosevelt, and I love this, he was the very first person in his county to ever go into the United States Military Academy at West Point. And he credits this this ability for him to make it there, to his high school counselor who really believed in him, along with his teachers and the other people that that helped him along the way, which I love the fact that he has so many accomplishments and that he does attribute that to not all to himself, but that he sees that other people supported him and helped him. And he went into West Point, he entered West Point, but then he also took a leave and went for 2 years and went on a mission for his church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and served his church in Brazil. And then when he returned, he went to West Point and became a infantry lieutenant before going to become an airborne ranger following 9/11. And he felt an intense need to serve our country and to stand up for our country. He became a Green Beret Special Forces officer. He is an amazing veteran. And then as it came to be, he has not been asleep. He's been paying attention. He sees what is happening not only in our country, but what is happening in Utah, and that we need to stand up for our Constitution, frankly. We need to make some different decisions. And he decided to run for the Congressional District 2, which used to be Congressman Chris Stewart's seat, or I really hate that language, so please forgive me. I'm going to return that. It was a position that Congressman Chris Stewart, was voted into. It is now Celeste Malloy was voted by special election, and Colby is running as a candidate for that position. And I think that we have Colby on, but I can't see you, Colby. Can you hear me? Can we hear you? Okay, so you know what I think is happening is I think we've got Colby in. There's a little bit of a problem that sometimes we have with technology. We were just talking about how convenient and wonderful technology is, and also can bite you in the back sometimes. So hopefully we will be able to get that straightened out very quickly. Dwayne, are you able to get Colby into the same place where we are? I hope we're working on that. It's a little bit of a problem when our guest is not in the same room where we are. So, Dwayne, I'm counting on you to get that problem fixed. Colby is, as I said, he is running for the Congressional District 2. And this is not a problem. This is not a situation that is strictly a Utah situation. We have seen Republicans, definitely Democrats, but we've seen Republicans vote in a way that really violates our Constitution and definitely puts our country at risk. And that is the reason that Colby got in the race. He's like, you know what? We can complain all day, but we do need to do something. We're in a serious straits. And I also think it's really awesome and amazing that, which is extremely unusual, that our senator from Utah, Senator Mike Lee, which I think everybody knows, he was endorsed in convention by our Senator Mike Lee. Usually he doesn't endorse people until after, but he came out and said that it was so important. It wasn't personal. It's not personal at all, but it's very important that we get Colby Jenkins into office. And I would like to discuss with Colby some of the reasons why it is so important. And I am just going to text Colby. If worse comes to worse, he can call in if he can't get any other way. 385, and this is the call-in number for everyone, 899-2134. So if we can't get him on through the front door, we'll see if we can bring him on as a caller, and we can get him to join. So it is, I think, extremely important to note some of the things that are happening with some of the bills that are being passed in our legislature, in our Congress. Colby, is that you?
No,
We
this
have
is me.
people.
I'm thinking you should send him that invitation again, just to make sure
Okay.
he's got the right one, because you had
Do
one
you
earlier that was
do
incorrect.
you want
Go
to
ahead.
send that, Dwayne? Because I'm not really in a position to do that where I
I
am.
can do that for you.
Okay, great. So you'll send him a
do you-
link.
I don't have his email, but if you give it to me, I'll
Okay.
send it to you.
I feel like I can give this email out on
Yeah,
the
put it
air.
in the chat. Put it in the chat,
Okay.
and
I will
I'll
put
send
it
him
in
an
the
email.
chat. And
We'll
then
see if we can.
get
We'll see if
that.
we can raise him. Put his.
Yes. He says
email
he's in. See, he's telling me that he is in.
I think, you know what? He's in the other room.
He's in the other room. So that's
Yes,
like, if
so-
you can help get him into this room, that would be really nice, because it would be nice to be able to talk.
Yeah. Put his email in the chat. I'll send him an email and his phone, and I'll give him a call.
Okay. I did text it to you.
Okay.
And
Got it.
I think if you know, some of these email addresses are self-evident. If you kind of think about it, you can kind of think about what it might be, which I love. You know, it's kind of nice, but you do have to guess a few things. But I'm sure Colby loves people to get in touch with him. He is running for office, and candidates really like to talk to constituents and voters. And I've had such a great time discussing these extremely important issues with Colby in person, because I feel, you know, I think everyone knows I am a lover of liberty. I am very much a lover of truth. I am not interested in facades or things that sound good. I am very interested in getting to the core, getting to the truth. And I do think at this date, we cannot kick the can down the road. We cannot continue to say, you know, let's just worry about this later. Let's do what is politically correct. Let's not worry about that right now. We can't afford to not increase our debt ceiling limit of our country, because it's going to look bad, and we can't afford to shut our government down. And I just totally disagree with that. We shut our government down every weekend, and guess what? The world does not fall apart. And if we keep increasing our debt ceiling limit, what keeps happening? How do you get, I don't even know how much in debt we are now. It's probably more than $34 trillion. How do you get $34 trillion in debt? You do it by spending money that you don't have. You do it by continuing to increase the debt ceiling limit rather than stop the bleeding, stop the spending. We have this amazing Constitution, and it's crystal clear. Go to the very beginning, Article 1, Section 8. It lists in Section 8, there's 20 clauses, maybe 22. Sorry, I can't remember exactly, but about maybe 18 or 19 clauses. And in that section, Article 1, Section 8, it lists and clearly states this is the power that Congress has. And it states that they do not have power that is not listed there. And so we should not be spending money on things that are not those 20 powers. We absolutely should not.
Colby, are you there?
If Congress, if it's
Hello,
not.
Colby, are you there?
Yes, hi, this is Colby.
Hi, this is Dalane. I'm the producer. Dalane sent you the wrong link.
Oh, no.
So I re-emailed it to you to see if you can hop in.
Let's see here. What email address did you send it to?
I sent it to colbyforutah.com.
Okay.
And the subject is link for streaming.
Okay. Colby at colbyforutah.com.
Yes.
Okay. I'm not
Oh,
seeing
you
it.
know what? Hang on a second. I misspelled it. That's why. Let me send it to you again. Sorry about that.
Okay.
I got it off the phone from Dalane, but hang on. Let's go. Colby at Colby. It's FOR Utah, right?
Yes.
Here we go.
Okay, we're going to be getting Colby in. We should be able to get him
Of course,
into
I typed it in wrong. Of course.
Hopefully very soon we will be able to get him to join us.
Okay. Yeah. It just bounced back to me and said, notice address not found. but I sent it to the right one this time.
Okay, cool. Let me see. I'll just refresh my inbox there. So. It's got to get routed through China first, and get scrubbed, and then there we go. Okay, I got the link. Should I hang up here?
Yes, Dalane, I have Colby on the phone, but he's gonna link with us. So
Right.
he'll be right here.
I just clicked on the link.
Let's see if we can get him in.
Let's do.
I hear him.
There we go.
Okay, Colby, I'm
Okay.
gonna disconnect here, and you can join. We'll have you join in just a second. There he is.
Okay, Colby, I have given your bio, but I'm going to start anew because then we can kind of start from scratch since you're here. So I'm going to quickly give a really quick bio. So if we gave a real bio for Colby, we wouldn't have time for him to be on the show. So I'm just going to do an abbreviated version. He was born and raised in Roosevelt. That is a small, very small rural area in Utah. And he was the very first person, male or female, from that county to ever go to the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. And I love the fact that Colby credits this amazing achievement to his one is his high school counselor, who he felt like really impacted his life and really helped him. I just love that. And he also credits his teachers and leaders and other people that impacted him. And I love this because it shows, we're not in a silo, and how we really can impact and affect each other. Obviously, his life has impacted and affected so many others. He did enter West Point, was there for 2 years. Then he left West Point to go on a mission for his church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He served there for 2 years in Brazil. When he returned, he went back to West Point and served there. And I can't, you became a Green Beret. I'm doing very abbreviated because now I'm on my memory, but became a Green Beret and has served our country ever so well. And then, because I think a lot of us are kind of awake and seeing what is happening in our country, the great concerns that we have for our country, and seeing that our fellow Congresspeople whom we love and respect and revere are making decisions that are literally destroying our nation. They're not just destroying our freedom, they are destroying our nation. Just such unbelievably unwise decisions, probably out of ignorance and being manipulated and lied to. But there's such a lack of wisdom happening, and Colby jumped into the race. And so he is a candidate for Congressional District 2. And Colby, welcome. We're so happy to have you join us today.
Well, thank you. What a privilege. I mean, ever since the first opportunity we met on the campaign trail, you have been an inspiration and a support. So thank you.
Yes,
it
was such a joy to meet you. And I have grilled you. I have asked you because I am very concerned about our country. And I am a seeker of truth. And then when I learn truth, I try to speak the truth, because I love relationships. Relationships are really important. They're eternal. But we cannot allow our love for somebody, our relationship with somebody, get in the way of doing what is right for our country. We must take a stand and do what is right for our country. And I just want to mention really quickly, something very unusual is a sitting senator, especially Mike Lee. He does endorse people, but he doesn't usually give an endorsement when they're in convention. He usually waits until after, when we're in a primary, even after that, before he makes an endorsement. But he did come out in convention and endorse you. And I know that he, per conversation with you, he grilled you heavily. He did not give this endorsement lightly. He grilled you very heavily because it was before a convention, and it was not endorsing an incumbent. He came out and endorsed you. So I'd like you to just really quickly give us a little bit of taste of that experience of being grilled by Senator Mike Lee.
Yeah, it was intense, and his staff and he had been tracking our campaign as we won down here in Washington County by 12 points when Celeste Malloy and I were head to head. So that really got everyone's attention, and then just the momentum that we've built. And then it came to a head where really Senator Lee saw the votes that Celeste Malloy had been making, and like the rest of us thought, how in the world she's doing this with a challenger breathing down her neck? What's she going to do over 2 more years when there isn't such pressure? And so that's when he really came and said, well, we can't have this in the Utah delegation. So kind of have to put my money where my mouth is, because he and others have been saying to America, send us reinforcements. And he saw that in his own delegation, he's got a chance to make that change. And so I think that was the catalyst that ultimately led to me getting a phone call late one evening, and introduced himself and just went right at it. And he asked very pointed questions, as simple as, will you defend the Constitution? Is there anything in your life, blah, 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 that would be embarrassing? Tell me about the Commerce Clause. How do you feel about the vertical line of federalism and the horizontal checks and balances he's quizzed me, and then he's been true to his word in terms of supporting us. This wasn't just a passing blow, if you will, of him saying, yeah, I support you, good luck. No, he has been in the trenches with us, and we've spent the day of the convention. We were hours together, strategizing, practicing, talking about next steps. He had me back in Washington, D.C. last week, and opened up lots of doors for us to meet new allies, new potential sources of support, including Senator Rand Paul. Met with him just one-on-one with my team and his chief of staff, and he openly endorsed and is wanting to help. And there'll be more news on that in the near future. But on down the line, yeah, it was multiple phone calls, multiple text messages. My wife got to be schooled on the Constitution as we were sitting in the car, and he would call and it would go to our car phone. And so, yeah, he's been, if anything, I'm excited even more now to win, just to gain him as a friend and mentor, because every conversation has been uplifting, not casual in terms of flippant, but serious, because like you said, the stakes are too high, and the opportunity for me to be in the foxhole with him and others now is critical.
Yeah, we are just we're past the tipping point.
Yeah.
I really feel it is so critical, and we just can't get people that we like, that we're friends with. We can't elect people that name recognition. We've got to have someone who truly, truly understands the Constitution and will not be swayed by leadership, which we have seen over and over. Decades of my life, I just see people that are good, honorable people, and they get back to DC, and then they allow the money and the power and the establishment there do something, twist their brains around, and they do things that are just unbelievable. And we are not talking about feelings here. We're talking about evidence. We have these bills. We've been able to, I haven't read all of them myself, but I've read parts of them, and Senator Lee has read, and others have read them. So one thing we were talking about is, before you came on, is the debt ceiling limit. It just is unbelievable to me that anyone who has a slight degree of understanding of finances and money, when we are $34 trillion in debt as a nation, equal to our GDP, how could we even dream of increasing our debt ceiling limit? That just blows my mind. I'm like, there's no way we can afford to do that. And Celeste was honest when she was running that she was planning to vote to increase it. We can't afford to shut our government down. Like, we can't afford not to. Because as we were discussing, Article 1, Section 8 is so clear. Here are the 20 things Congress has the power to spend money on. And if it's not one of those things, we better get out of it. You have no authority and power to be spending our sacred tax dollars on it. And that is the way to solve this financial crisis. It isn't complicated. We've been given this Constitution to really help us. So I'm really excited. And I know that Senator Lee did vet you constitutionally. It wasn't about your personality or your connections. It was about how you align with the Constitution. So I would love you to talk about, let's discuss some of the bills that have been passed. Nearly $2.5 million to subsidize clinics that routinely provide abortions up to 22 weeks in pregnancy. That was in this massive $2 trillion bill. How does a Republican vote for that bill. I don't even understand, honestly, how a Democrat does. How does anybody support a bill that gives money to any institution who supports abortion up to 22 weeks?
Yeah, what you're seeing is a pattern of rationalization amongst not only Republicans, but what we're seeing now as the uniparty.
Right.
Republicans in name only, who are getting plucked off by the majority Democrats and voting with them time and time again, like Celeste did, not only on the first omnibus package earlier this spring, but on the second one that had that particular earmark. And I'm not naive. We're not naive. There's really no such thing as a perfect bill.
Of course.
But good grief. I mean, this and so many other points that were in that bill that omnibus package, second one, only passed because every Democrat, all of them. So we got to give the Democrats credit. When they want to spend our money, they stick together.
They come together, boy. They're like glue.
Yeah.
They fall in line.
The only way that passed is they succeeded in picking off just enough Republicans to join them. And amongst them were two of our own, Blake Moore and Celeste Malloy, time and time again. And they rationalize that by saying, well, we have such a slim majority. We've got to settle for these few breadcrumbs. I got one or two successes for my district. But what they fail to acknowledge that you and I and so many others are aware of, well, there's an iceberg of bad underneath that water. And that's what you and our constituents are hiring me to do, is to stand up and say, no, I'm going to stay with my Republican majority, even though we have one or two, or maybe now we're up to four with some special, we have a slim majority.
But we still, this is what I don't understand, Colby, is we do still have the majority. So we don't have to make deals with the minority to do. I mean, we can make deals if it's the right thing. I'm not opposed to making deals when it's right, but our legislation, and I love what you said, we never, there's no such thing as a perfect bill. I've never seen one yet, but at least never get passed. So, but there's always the legislation when we pass it, it's not perfect, but does it bring us more freedom or does it give us less? Does it, even though it's not perfect, but from where we currently are, does it give us more freedom from our current state? And I cannot say that any of these bills give us more. I say they all totally put us in bondage, in not only financial bondage, but also in liberty prison. Like it also takes our freedoms away from us, as well as.
And what you've heard and I've heard along the campaign trail over and over again is what are we going to do about the border? What are you, Colby, going to do about the border? And Chip Roy and others who lead this fight in Congress, they said there wasn't one new policy or spending measure in that particular 1.2 trillion that closed the border. And Celeste and others say, well, we added security to the border because we funded more detention facilities, more detention beds, and we gave border control guards overtime so that they can now more efficiently and quickly process the flow of illegal immigrants. And that's not closing the border. No. And that's not what we're being hired to do. And so it's just a pattern of, and actually we posted, I got an article posted today on the Blaze that talks to what we're speaking here. And really the punchline there is the uniparty wants to demoralize us. They want us to think that, well, golly gee whiz, we just got to settle for all of this. What else can we do? We have such a slim majority. Heaven forbid we stand up and show courage. We just got to settle, and that's not okay.
And, the border seems like something that we should every citizen in the nation should agree on. Again, constitutionally, Article 4, Section 4 clearly states the federal government's role is to secure our borders. We love immigration. We believe in immigration. Come to the front door. We're all in. We want you to come here, come through the front door so we don't have sex trafficking, drugs, criminals. We don't have all of that. And we know who you are. And then we can, and we're not just giving freebies. So what is happening on that? This is probably not a fair question, but what do you think we can do? Like if you are in Congress, what do you think we can do to secure our borders? Because we already have the laws necessary. We don't really need to pass a law.
Exactly. Right now, the first solution is we vote for President Trump. That's the first solution. I mean, that's black and white, night and day.
Even if you don't like him, even if you can't stand him, even if you think he's pond scum, You can see the only hope we have of securing our borders is to vote for President Trump.
Correct. We have two choices. I mean, the reality is we have two choices right now. So you either vote for more of the same and worse, or you vote for what we had before, where our border was shut down, where we did provide. Yeah, we had leadership. And I mentioned that it seems like such an obvious thing, but for any of the listeners, ask my opponent who she voted for. I mean, it seems like an obvious thing, but ask her who she voted for. So that's why I just start there, because if you can't even get that right as a U.S. representative, then how can you be trusted to battle for our land and water and even bigger issues if you fail at that principal start point? And so, getting Trump back in immediately, he and his new administration, they're going to start looking for legislative allies. Okay, who's going to help us secure these executive changes, executive orders that are going to get rolled back, remain in Mexico? And they're going to see one combat veteran Green Beret that's going to say, I got your back. I voted for you, for one. And I know what an invasion looks like. And this has got to stop. And so that's how we start. Remain in Mexico, in the catch and release, complete the wall, and then actually take away all those incentives that serve as a magnet for tens of thousands of legal immigrants a week. Like you said, we want legal immigration. Mm-hmm. We want people to come through the front door. Our nation needs that, but we're not doing anyone. I think I heard a stat yesterday, 25,000 military-age Chinese males, at least. I mean, who knows, really, that are across our border. And a military-aged male Chinese does not leave China just by a circumstance, by chance.
No, absolutely. It's hard to get out of there. And I have a friend that lived in China, learned Chinese by immersion. And she loves the culture of China, and she loves Chinese people. And she will tell you that you don't come here to America. It's very hard to get here, and that almost everyone here, and of course there's exceptions, without a doubt, that have been able to come here and get away and that love America. But most of the ones, especially those who teach Chinese immersion in school, they're Chinese nationalists. They come here to teach us to love China, to infiltrate us, and to, kind of take over our mentality in our country. TikTok's an example. So you just stated it so right. They're not coming here to add to America.
Yes.
That's not happening. And that's just unbelievably unwise. And so nobody that loves America would ever allow this to happen to our country. No. Okay, so this wasn't a super recent, but it was fairly recent. It was last year in 2023. There was an amendment to make it so that the military, the U.S. would not fund transition surgeries or therapy in the military. Okay, if you were in Congress at the time, how would you have voted on that bill? Now, keep in mind, you would only have 2 minutes to make that decision.
Yeah. So it begins with the military is not a social experiment. It's a warfighting machine that we need to have ready and lethal. And so all the social experiments that have been happening in our military have directly contributed to why our army is at its lowest levels since World War II. They've missed their recruiting numbers for consecutive years, and they scratch your head and say, well, maybe we need to pay more. No, people don't want to join the military right now because they see what's happening, what you just described. So I would certainly be against any of those social engineering, social experiments that do not contribute to our warfighting readiness and capabilities. And keep in mind, as you noted, my daughter is at West Point right now, and in 2 years she'll be a young lieutenant stepping into the military. So and that back to Senator Lee's conversation, he was leery of me being a military man because he's seen military people who become members of Congress who ultimately end up just kissing the ring of the military and not standing up and demanding accountability. And I reassured him, I'm anything but that. I've seen how we came out of Afghanistan and the mess that happened there, and how our leaders could allow that to happen. And I'm seeing what's happening now across the Department of Defense leadership. So I'm excited to actually contribute my military experience for the good, for accountability and leadership, because I've got personal skin in the game.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, with your experience and then with your daughter there, it really matters.
Yeah.
And that I just really appreciate what you brought up, because that our military, I just honor our military so much. I'm so grateful for their
Thank you.
service,
Yeah.
your service and your sacrifice. I want to be able to honor them, but what is happening from the inside is such a travesty. It's very, very sad.
Yeah.
Okay,
It's unreal, actually.
it's unreal.
How the
Yeah.
Secretary of Defense can be AWOL and then basically say, no big deal.
Yeah, it is. My father was in World War II. My brother served in the military for most of his life, most of his adult life. And yeah, he just recently died. And
Oh,
it is really, I just respect so much. And he was expressed to me on many occasions, because we both love liberty and we both love America. And he expressed to me on many occasions of late of how sad he was to see the undoing of our military and the destruction. Because of course he wants his children and grandchildren to be military people, but he doesn't want the violation of our moral foundation and of our, own religious beliefs to be violated in that way. So,
yeah.
Okay. So do you have any other specific legislation that you would like to talk about that you're particularly concerned about?
Yeah, it deals with the Fourth Amendment in the Bill of Rights, the right to protect us from illegal search and seizure, and that's been in the news, for
Yes.
decades, but more recently, FISA, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. Just a little bit of history. It came into being back in the 70s, but really got its tentacles, if you will, after 9/11, in the wake of the Patriot Act, when our nation saw, hey, we need to be able to listen and scoop up communication from bad guys talking inward and back and forth. But in that process of scooping up all of those communications, the federal government scooped up a lot of it, yours and my communications. And those go into a FISA database. And for decades, the FBI and others should not have been accessing that U.S. person data without a warrant. That's just fundamental to our Constitution and to us.
So crystal clear in the Constitution. I don't know how you can misinterpret it. It's crystal clear.
So that power was set to expire last December 2023. And on the verge of it coming into debate, Senator Lee, thankfully, stood up once again, with Director Wray of the FBI and just cited example after example. In just a few, 19,000 times, the FBI pulled illegally the records of people who donated to President Trump. Yes. Without a warrant. So that's, if you donated Trump, your records could have been looked at, your communication, and on and on and on, up hundreds of thousands of illegal searches of U.S. person data. Yeah. So that should have expired. It should have been killed. And if anything is ever to come back, it should come back in a better, different form with the warrant requirement. So Senator Lee and others like Thomas Massey in the House, Chip Roy and other freedom-loving Americans voted no on that. But Congress attached it to the National Defense Authorization Act so that it would have to pass. But that's an incorrect argument, if you will. You don't have to pass anything. You can. Yeah.
It's called being blackmailed. They were blackmailed, and they allowed themselves to be blackmailed instead of saying, "I'm not being blackmailed."
Yes.
No, I'm not doing it.
And so Celeste, Blake Moore, and others voted yes. And then they justified it saying, well, I voted for the military. Well, no, you didn't. You voted for something that's fundamentally unconstitutional, and you put it on the backs of the military when you could have just done your job and detached the FISA provision, passed a clean NDAA, and gotten that through without the unconstitutional provision. So Congress passed that. They gave 4 more months. They gave FISA 4 more months. And that bill became due in April, a couple of weeks ago. And once again, the debate was get a warrant. Mm-hmm. Now, to Celeste's credit, an amendment came to the floor that would require a warrant. She voted yes for that. But here's where the legislative trick happens. She voted yes, but that amendment failed. So the FISA reauthorization came up for a vote without a warrant, and she voted yes for it. So what is it? You're either for a warrant or you're not. But when the leadership twists your arm and says you're going to vote this way, then she caved and got bulldozed once again. And so again, she rationalizes it. Others rationalize it saying, well, we had 55 reforms. We told the FBI, here are 55 more rules. Now go police yourself and don't break the rules like they've been doing for 2 decades. And that's not okay. It's not okay. So I would have voted no both times on that, because that's what the Constitution demands. There's no rationalization on that. And so those were key contrast in spending and in protecting our fundamental rights, where I contrast with my opponent. And then, if you're failing at those key fundamental issues, then how can we trust her or anyone when closer to home for water and land? And that's what I hear from my constituents. Well, how are you going to help us with water and land? Well, first, I'm going to make sure that I'm not putting you underwater by spending us into oblivion, like my opponent has done. And so that's, we got to get those national level issues right before we can even have a chance at home.
Well, I actually believe, and I'm open to being wrong, but I just believe that I think that all the candidates running for Congress for CD2, I believe every single one of you cares about our lands in Utah. So I don't think there's anyone on the list that's like, yeah, I don't really care about Utah. I don't really care about our lands. I'm just not even going to fight for that. So I think that's a given. Everyone running is going to stand up for our lands.
Yes.
And everyone's going to say they are. And I think that's an easy one. So I think it kind of like the border, like who is not going to be in favor of protecting our border, except the things that are happening are not protecting our border that you have mentioned. And so, Colby, it really comes down to, do you have the spine to stand up to the establishment? Because they are going to twist your arm. They are going to pressure you. We all know that they will. They are going to try very hard. And Rob Bishop, when he first got in, because he said all the right things and sounded wonderful, and I believe that his values, his morals, his principles were solidly there. I knew him. I knew what he believed in. But when he got back there, one of the first votes that he voted on, I'm trying to remember what it was, but he voted wrong. We all knew it. And he knew it. He stood against it. But the establishment came in, the leadership came in, and they were able to talk him in. And he started to believe that he needed to vote for it. And he did. He made a bad vote. And, he repented of it. Unfortunately, we're still stuck with it. But he was able to see that he was manipulated. How do we know, and how do you know that when they get started on you, because they're very, very good at what they do, they're very good at pressuring and twisting arms, how do you know you will be able to stand up to them?
Yeah. Well, what you and our constituents are going to get is what you've gotten for 30 years from me. I swore an oath 31 years ago to the Constitution to support and defend, and that hasn't changed. I still wear the flag on my shoulder as a colonel in the reserve, and now my daughter's taken that similar oath, and now I'll hopefully take one as a member of Congress. And so that oath, to me, it's not just lip service. I have friends who've died for it. And I have soldiers who've donated to the campaign who are writing me every day, reminding me that, hey, I have one old team sergeant who says, I want to be your driver. I said, I don't need a driver. But his point is he wants to be in the foxhole, to just your point that, hey, we have to surround ourselves with good people. We have to build that A-team around me, around our staff, to make sure that we always remember, my guiding principle will be, I'm not voting for self-preservation. I'm voting for the people who hired me, and who can fire me. And so if I ever find myself straying from that, then I should be fired. I don't want to make this a career. I'm not a politician. I'm a public servant. I'm a combat veteran. I've been in a helicopter that was shot down. I've been in gunfights. So yeah, if anyone wants to twist my arm, then I've been in worse. Nobody's shooting at me in a small in a room. And the beauty of today's technology, if anybody does try to do that to me, I can step right outside and say, hey, voters, CD2, look what just happened. And here's the decision I made. Here's the stand I made. And here's those who are working against me. I mean, our goal is going to be transparent, as real as we can get it, real-time communication, because I work for you. I don't work for the Uniparty.
Wonderful. Okay, I just want to remind everyone you are listening to KMMU.org. So you are connected live on Rumble, YouTube, X or Twitter, and you can go to our website, kmmu.org, and we're really delighted to have CD2 candidate Colby Jenkins with us today, and we've been grilling him on where he would stand on many of these issues that really are vital to our survival as a nation. They're absolutely essential to our survival. So I would love to know where you as a military man, a lot of times, you've absolutely had been able to exercise your Second Amendment rights. How do you feel about lay citizens who, like, where do you stand on that? How do you feel about us carrying arms and be able to protect ourselves versus having the military or the police come and protect us?
For sure. It goes back to the Constitution. The language in the Constitution is shall not be infringed when it comes to the Second Amendment. And so it's not my job to add or take away from that. And it's not the court's job to do that. It's my job to defend that and to limit government, to limit federal spending that may infringe upon that. And so it's pretty simple. Shall not be infringed. And then that's where I stand. That's what you're hiring me to do, is to defend, not to make up my own ideas about the Constitution, but to defend it. And so that's where I would stand.
Okay, so a lot of people say, there's a lot of mental illness right now, which there is. And so, like, how do you feel is the best solution or resolution? Because there's maybe red flag laws. How do you feel about red flag laws? Like, we're not taking the right for people to own guns away from everybody, but there's just certain people that we should target and maybe limit their ability to get a gun or their right to own a gun. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, that's not okay. That's shall not be infringed. And it becomes a slippery slope. You look at, in order to operate and drive a car, you have to get a license. You have to meet some basic requirements, age requirements, residency, and so forth. So I could understand background checks in that regard to make sure you have a license to operate a gun, but not that slippery slope of red flag laws where the government is now choosing who can and who cannot exercise that Second Amendment right.
Yeah, that's what's so amazing about our Constitution, is that you actually have to commit a crime before you can try for it. You don't get prosecuted for committing a crime that you might.
Yes.
You have to actually commit it before you get tried. And
Yeah.
red flag laws completely cut the Constitution out. Your right to due process.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're problematic. And I do think that we do need to seek solutions for, obviously we want to be secure and safe. And there's crazies out there. I actually believe that we should have more people carrying.
Yes. Yeah. Why don't we flip the paradigm? Next time you walk into a bank, look at how well guarded it is. I mean, we want to guard our money, and
Yes.
why don't we do that with our children at school?
Yeah.
Who are most vulnerable? Because, like you said, no matter how many laws we make or red flag, how much we want to infringe upon the Second Amendment, the bad guys are still going to be armed and they're still going to look for our vulnerable targets. So why don't we decide to protect our children as more, or at least as much as we do our banks?
Absolutely.
Why don't we do that instead of being naive to it?
Yeah, exactly. Because the red flag laws, like, you're literally, like you said, you're giving the government permission to decide who gets and who doesn't, winners and losers. And if you believe in maybe religion, or you believe certain things, you don't believe that people, like young children, should be transgendered, or have their bodies mutilated, then maybe you don't qualify to be able to have a gun.
Exactly.
If you don't believe in the ESG,
Yeah.
you might not qualify. And I feel like the best way to secure defense is the best offense. As a teacher, I tell my students, no, I am here to protect you, and I always carry.
Thank you.
I am prepared and ready. I stand between you and anybody trying to do anything to you. I am here prepared, but I do believe that people should get trained and learn how to do it properly.
Yeah.
And so, okay, Colby, another issue that I think is really important right now is election integrity. And I like, where do you feel about that? Are you feeling like our elections are super secure? What do you think we need to do, if anything, and can do about our elections?
Yeah, I don't think there is an American who thinks they are secure, and if they are, then they're just kidding themselves. And that's why just yesterday or the day before, Senator Lee, with co-sponsor Chip Roy and others, presented legislation called the Void Act, if I remember right. I'm forgetting the acronym, but it was
Right.
to make sure that all these illegals that are coming across, because we know the Biden administration and the Democrat strategy, they're wanting to just flood the playing field and allow these people to ultimately vote. And so Senator Lee and Chip Roy and others are wanting to have legislation that, I mean, it seems obvious that you have to have an ID before you can vote. You actually have to prove that you're a citizen before you can vote. So just basic things like that. And I think where our confidence is lacking is we don't have really a solid chain of custody between I cast my vote, it's counted even within my eyesight, and then it's registered, it's locked, it's logged. Because right now here in Utah, we have the mail-in ballot system, and,
Right.
and I know people who've gotten multiple ballots because maybe they've moved, and and so multiply that by the tens of thousands, and just the opportunity for fraud is incredible. And then you have an incumbent who beat, or I'm sorry, you have a challenger who beat the incumbent by 14 points, and you have Phil Lyman who beat Governor Cox by double that.
Yeah.
But yet let's see what happens in the primary, where there's all kinds of fraud opportunities, and where the lieutenant governor herself, who's on the ballot, is responsible for the execution of the elections. How does that compute? That doesn't make any sense. How does my opponent get allowed on the special election ballot when she missed several fundamental check boxes, but yet Phil Lyman's lieutenant governor candidate, he gets booted by the
Right.
same person making that call.
Exactly.
So the
Isn't
application.
that just so? I mean, that is so telling. Like in that case, it was perfectly fine. We're just like, oh, give it a pass. But then when it comes to Phil Lyman's choice, Lieutenant Governor, nope, no way.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
it is really fascinating.
So yeah, I would love to see and the feasibility of this. I mean, it doesn't seem realistic, but why not try? Single day voting, national holiday, paper ballots, have to prove your identification, ballot casted, ballot counted within eyesight of the voter. I mean, fundamental basic things. Why don't we at least try to do that? And those would be things that I would want to work towards.
Yeah, and I agree with everything you said, and I would support in absentee ballots. I totally support people in, because you have to give your ID, you have to show who you are. If you want to get your ballot in advance, we've always done it. It's
Yes.
always been accessible, not only to military, elderly, anybody who wants it. You don't even have to say, well, I'm old, I can't go. You can just apply, and as well it should be. You want your ballot early, then you apply, and then we have some chain of custody. We have some stewardship over that instead of this insanity of just sending them out. Colby, are you willing to take any phone calls in case we have any?
You bet.
I have a call. I have a call for you. I have Jill on the
Already got a
line.
call. Before we take the caller, I just want to put the number out there. It's 385-899-2134 in case anybody else wants to call in. So caller, I don't know your name, but go for
This
it.
is Jill. This is Jill. Go ahead, Jill.
Go, Jill.
Well, okay. Well, thank you so much for Dalane for the show, and Colby. It was a pleasure meeting you at convention, and I'm so excited about you running for the state of Utah. We need more people like you. Since Dalane just covered the subject that I was going to ask about, which was election integrity, because I'm a big believer in what Trump's been promoting in the last 4 years, is, one day national holiday, the ID for citizenship, paper ballots, hand count, all the way down to precinct level. I really believe that's the only way. We've got to get this going with voting with no machine. But since you guys covered it, what I would like to ask you is this default situation we have with ICE putting us up as a sanctuary state, not by any election or choices that our legislature or our governor made, but by the fact that we're just simply not supporting them. And I'd like to know, because it's a big issue right now with the immigrants coming in and they're landing, they're sending them in from New York and other places. How do you feel about how we could fix this problem, and how do we make this a big deal here in Utah? Because it is a big deal.
Yeah, and thank you, Jill, and thanks for calling in, and thanks for your support. That means a lot. That boils down to, like many issues, leadership. We need a governor who stands up and supports our sheriffs and doesn't put our sheriffs in situations that they just can't win. This is an ICE federal issue, and when it comes to detaining illegal immigrants and so forth, our sheriffs aren't funded for that. They're not manned or staffed to house floods of illegal immigrants. That this is a federal issue and it requires federal leadership. And our governor needs to stand up and support our local law enforcement to make sure that we don't become inundated by more and more illegal immigrants. And then we turn to our sheriffs and say, well, it's your problem. And they say, well, that's not our charge. And that's not what we're funded for, or what we should be enforcing. And the sheriffs are going to do it. Our sheriffs are wonderful. They're not going to let criminals roam free in our society, but boy, that it's not in their scope, if you will, and ICE and the federal leadership is just pushing it off onto them.
Okay. Well,
Great answer. Thank you.
And if you can hear me, Dwayne?
Yes, you're on.
I just had a quick, okay. Yeah, I just wanted to say my follow-up is I'm a big supporter of the MAGA movement, and no matter what happens to Trump at this point, he championed this for the last 4 years, and MAGA has become so big as the movement, and we already know for a fact that there are people in the we call them the rhinos, that are organizing all around the country with the Uniparty to go against us right now. And I just want to let you know, I hope you'll stand strong for MAGA, because we're alive, we're well, and we are rising. And MAGA is about the movement. It's what it stands for. It's just exactly about making America great again, and all the issues it takes to make America great. Regardless if he crashed tomorrow, something happened, MAGA's got to live on, and they're fighting us. They're raising money to fight the Uniparty, to fight MAGA right now. Just wanted to know how you stood about MAGA.
Yeah, I voted for President Trump twice before, and I'll vote for him again. We really don't have a choice. We can't. Our country will not survive with 4 more years of what we've already been experiencing the last 3+ years. So I'll put the challenge back on you. Go ask my opponent who she voted for and who she was supporting up until Nikki Haley dropped, and you'll see the contrast. And so yeah, I'm excited to have President Trump. And when I talk to people who, like Dalane was saying, well, this or that, and quote, and they identify all his faults and not perfect. And well, look at all the downstream effects. Look at the change just for our state, having a new director of the BLM under the Trump administration. That will impact my district night and day. Our county commissioners are just praying for that change in the BLM. Just that one change alone would be so tremendous for our district, for our land and our water, and let alone all the upper national world changes that will happen under Trump leadership.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. And like I said, go MAGA.
Thank you for calling.
Thank you, Jill. Thank you so much for that great question and comment, because, it really isn't about a person. It really is about our legacy and making America great again. And I just want to, for those people, I'll just quickly say, for those people who are struggling with President Trump, there's not a perfect person on the ballot. So we've always had to vote for imperfect people. But I think, what about King David? He was a prophet of God. He made some serious errors, but he remained the prophet. He remained the king. He, he had to work through a repentance process, but the Lord still dealt with him, and he still did great things. I think, when there was Jacob, with all of his legacy and all of his 12 children, did the Lord have Jacob save the people? He had, it was interesting because he did not. He had the Pharaoh save the people. The Pharaoh wasn't even a religious man. The Pharaoh wasn't called of God. Well, he wasn't called of God in that way, but he was called of God to save the people. And he did through David. And so through Joseph, through Jacob's son, Joseph. And so I think, we want to have righteous people. We want to have good leaders. But I think let's be realistic about, the Lord uses who's willing, who's capable, who has the talents, and who's willing to be in that. I was trying to think of a military word, and it won't come to my mind, but you know what it is, Colby. When you're in the trenches, what do you call it?
when you're ambushed, when you're under fire.
Yeah, when you're under fire, you got to have somebody that can handle it. And I honestly, I don't know very many people. I don't really know anybody else who could handle the ambush and the fire that President Trump has taken. So, you know, it's not, and it isn't about him. It is about the principles. It's about the fruits that he has given us. We know from his fruits what he will do in the future because of what he did in the past. And so I would encourage everybody to choose wisely, inquire of the Lord and choose wisely. And Colby, you are on all accounts such an excellent candidate. I think we would really be not only wise, we would be very blessed to get you in to Congress. And so we're really, really appreciative of you being with us today and wish you all the best. Give everybody your website. What do you need help with?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Dalane. Right back at you. I mean, it's no coincidence that we've connected on this path. So thank you. Our website is colbyforutah.com. So Colby, FOR, Utah.com. And frankly, right now, it is about fundraising. Celeste Malloy has the DC incumbent money. She's got the Speaker of the House Leadership Fund. She's their pliable vote. She's their pliable. Yeah, look up Skyline Capital and other people who are happy to keep the gravy train going. So yeah, I welcome $50, $100, or hopefully more. It allows us to now scale this message, the message that has been winning throughout the convention caucus phase. We've won at every stop. We won by 14 points with the incumbent against her, and so now we just have to scale that message and make sure that more people can hear it, and that requires money. I'm not independently wealthy. Friends and family have been funding this so far, but now we've really got to scale. So I would welcome any amount of support, puts gas in the tank for us to get the word out.
Yeah, Colby's been serving our country and defending our freedoms, and we need to step up and do everything that we can. So I'd invite everyone to call 10 people and get them to donate $25 a piece. It adds up, it makes a difference, and then ask them to call 2 or 3 people each and get out there. We need a warrior. We absolutely need a warrior. We have one. So I ask everyone to please make a donation and be sure and hang a sign and call your friends and let them know. Because the people that meet Colby, when they meet him in person and they look him in the eye and they ask him the hard questions, they meet both candidates. There's no question but which one we can trust and elect to go back and stand for us in Washington, D.C. Thank you so much, Colby. Really appreciate you taking time to be on here. Keep up the good work, and we'll do what we can. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Have a beautiful day. Thank you. God bless you. And remember, you are the guardian of your liberty. Thank you.
Thank you.